Hi, I'm Chris.
Hi, I'm Dave.
And this is Davo and Zio's Custom Tractor Works. Today we're going to be working on our CA again, and if you tuned into the last episode, you probably saw us using the surface conditioning tool and putting some rust reformer on. So we've continued to do that since the last episode, and we want to show you some of those products. So we'll take a look at that and see what we did. In our last episode, we used the surface conditioning tool to get some of the larger flat areas. But of course, on a tractor, you've got all sorts of little nooks and crannies you have to get into. So a drill is really handy, and Dave's going to show you some of the things we use on the drill.
So we use a good old-fashioned wire wheel. It goes right into the socket of the drill, and it works really well for big, open areas. But getting into those small areas is tough. They're tough to get to. It doesn't work very well. So we use a small... I'm not really sure what this material is.
Some kind of plastic abrasive stuff.
Yeah, it works really well getting in the small areas, especially on an extension. And then we do have another one, just slightly bigger, to get in some more nooks and crannies. And then we have another metal one. It's good, again, for these nice, flat, rounded areas there. That are out in the open, they work very well.
Now, of course, if you're going to take the whole tractor apart, you might be able to put certain parts in a part washer, do them individually. In this particular case, there was no reason to take all the parts off, so these little tools are really good. And if you didn't hear our first episode, it's important to mention that the first thing we do before we even bring it into the garage is we take a power washer, put degreaser, and clean the whole tractor up as much as we can. We also started in some areas with a sandblaster last time as well. So this is kind of step 2 that we're doing today. Right, so we're using 2 main products on this particular project. One, on the lighter rust, we're using Rust-Oleum Rust Reformer, which works really nice for the smaller areas and the areas where the rust is a little lighter. On the more pitted, deep rust areas, we're using a product called Black Star Rust Converter. It's pretty expensive, but it works well. I usually just put it into a can and paint it on with a brush. So other areas like the radiator here, you won't see this. The sheet metal will be covering it up. So we're actually, when we're all done, we'll just leave the rust reformer on there, and it will leave a nice black color. So anything you see underneath there won't be any rust or anything on it. We kind of call this our glow-in-the-dark rust tool. As you can kind of see, we've painted it on here with a brush. We're going to leave this overnight, but you can see it almost has sort of this glow to it. Kind of looks like we put a black light on it, but we didn't. So this is converting the rust. And again, we did this in the real bad rust areas with deep pits in it.
So after we apply the rust reformer, which you see here is all the black, we go on with a primer, and that's the Rust-Oleum primer. If we like it, it applies a nice, thick, even coat among the whole surface, and it really gives a good base for the paint that we're going to use later on.
So as Dave mentioned, this primer, the Rust-Oleum Professional, does a nice job of filling and smoothing some areas out. But sometimes the areas that have got a slight dent or maybe a small pits of rust, we use this Pro Glaze, and it works really well. So we're not going to do this today, but in our next episode, we're going to hit some of those really light areas with some glazing compound just to fill them in a little bit. Any dents, of course, you've got to go to something more like Bondo. But on the small areas, if you just want to smooth it out, I like this Pro Glaze product. Works really well.
So during this process, we're leaving on things like the distributor cap, the oil filter, as well as all these gauges here. We're doing this because, number one, it's one less thing to mask during this process. And we're going to leave them on to the final coat because there are parts that need replacing anyway. So if we leave them on instead of masking them, it's a lot less work, and it'll make a cleaner finished product.
So again, just to recap, today we did a little more cleaning with the wire wheel, a little bit with a wire brush, and used the rust reformer and the Black Star rust converter. We've started to do some priming. Join us on our next episode where we'll continue priming and talk about how we can fill some of the lighter pitted areas before the final coat of paint. Until then, I'm Chris.
I'm Dave.
And this is Davo and Zio's Custom Tractor Works.